Hello! Lately, I've been playing around with clouds in Blender because I wanted to make a system where I could easily create and iterate clouds in a performance-friendly way. So I showed up this little thing with curves where I can directly draw my clouds using the Draw Curve tool. And you asked me a lot about a tutorial, so here it is. So I start by creating a Bezier curve and a new geonodes. I'll create a resample curve, curve to points and instance on points, and connect everything together. An icosphere which is going to be instantiated, so I plug that into the instance socket. Scale instances with a random value to have variety into the different spheres. I also add a realize instance and merge by distance. Now what we have is spheres that appear along the curve with different scales. I'm adjusting min and max value for the scale to have big spheres for this base structure. Now create a new random value for rotation, and I'll put high values so we have a lot of rotation between the different spheres. I change count to evaluated to the two first nodes. And now we all join this into a frame to keep stuff organized. And this is the base structure for our cloud. For this second part, I'll create a distribute points on faces, instance on points, and icosphere. Same thing, random value goes into the scale. I'm adjusting min and max values to my liking. Same as before, a second one for rotation. A new scale instances node to scale the whole thing at once, and a new random value node that goes into the scale. We want to remesh this, so realize instances with a mesh to SDF grid to a grid to mesh. You can also do that with a conversion to volume instead. A cloud should be smooth, so we add a set shade smooth node at the end, set position node between distribute points on faces and instance on points, random value that goes into the offset. This will create an offset on some of the spheres to create some more volume on the cloud. A new random value set as boolean to control which spheres should be moved around, plugged into the selection socket. I switched back the random value of the offset to a float, so it's just easier to control. A new frame to keep everything clear. We also need a set material node, otherwise we won't be able to select the shader for our cloud. I'm creating the cloud material, so we can select it into the set material node. By the way, here's the whole geometry nodes graph. Back to the shader editor, I want to change the sky color a bit. Let's move on to the cloud shader. I use a principled BSDF with some subsurface on. I put the weight to 1 and increase a bit the scale. The roughness goes to maximum. The three radius values stand for red, green and blue, so I tweak them to have mostly blue that come out from the cloud. Now we create a texture coordinate with a Voronoi texture and a noise texture. This is going to be our displacement. I plug object into both vectors. Now I want to adjust the values of both nodes. I put the scale to something around 0.7. Let's mix those two noises into a mixed color node, and I'll put the factor around 0.8. I'm making a displacement node and I'm plugging the mix node into the height. Now the displacement goes into material output displacement, and I plug the BSDF back into the surface socket. Now we can adjust the displacement scale to our liking. Make sure you enable displacement and bump in the material properties. I'm gonna use these 3 nodes to create a custom ambient occlusion color. So I'm switching white and black, and we're gonna use that as a factor between our main cloud color and the shadow color. We can't use actual ambient occlusion because of the strong displacement. It would just look weird. So instead, I'm making this little system which will rely on lights with a negative power value. Now our cloud look a bit rocky, so I need to put those 2 stops closer to one another to make this effect more subtle. Back to the geometry nodes really quickly. I want to plug some parameters to the group input so we'll be able to control them directly into the modifiers tab to avoid to go back every time into the geometry node system to make changes. I'm also properly renaming every socket so I can easily remember what are their purpose. We could also add reroutes to make everything a bit less messy if we want, but I don't have the time for this, so let's move on to the next step. Let's add a new Bezier curve and add the geometry node system on it. I'm tweaking the values a bit, especially density, to have a cloud that renders faster. Now I'm going to create a mini cloud kit that will help us to create an actual cloud. The idea is just to have different shapes and sizes to combine them together, a bit like you would do with kitbash. I'm also putting the voxel size up because the clouds were starting to get pretty slow. This will do, so let's make the cloud. Because the whole cloud is made of multiple objects, I want to create an empty and parent every cloud part to it so I can easily move around the cloud without having to select a whole bunch of different objects. I'm creating the negative light I mentioned earlier. I started the power at -10, but I ended up going way lower than that because my clouds were so big in the scene. So -10 wasn't doing anything really. So if you want to stay within reasonable numbers, you'll have to tweak the scale of your objects. I'm also creating a few point lights as well. Make sure you inject shadow into the light properties. So a few final tweaks here and there, and our cloud is complete. What's left to do is just to add a couple nodes into the compositor, which are Kuwahara node and a glare. It's fully optional, but I just think it looks better. And we're done. And if you want, I released files on Gumroad, which includes this cloud system, pre-made clouds, a ready-to-use asset library, and Stormy Cloud. Link is in the description. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.